Whitman, coach to Justin Gaethje, came out and he said, Justin Gaethje's best weapon is one that we have kept hidden. And he said what it was. He said, Justin's wrestling offense, Justin's takedown. And it made me think, right? I mean, that's not like some real great trash talk, or that's not really even some mental gamesmanship. It was just a comment made by a coach. And I wonder if he's right. Because I have also thought this about Justin Gaethje. Here you have a guy who is a Division I All-American, 5th in the country at wrestling, but you don't see him use his wrestling. And I have to tell you, you don't see him use his wrestling because you don't see defense. A guy will never get credit for defense. It's just not the way the human mind works. You could watch Gaethje go have 10 fights and never take anybody down and come to the conclusion that he did not wrestle. When a little more trained eye will say, well, you just didn't see him wrestle because he did it defensively. Khabib has never beaten a guy that Khabib has not gotten on top of. Justin Gaethje has never had a guy get on top of him. So it's one of these things where Gaethje is out there wrestling. He wrestles every single night, but he's wrestling defensively. He wrestles to keep the match on its feet. Jose Aldo was another guy that was just fantastic at wrestling defensively. I would argue for you, many have said that George St. Pierre has the best MMA wrestling of anybody to have done it. I would agree with you on that. I would remind you that Jose Aldo had just as good of wrestling as St. Pierre, but it was in reverse. Jose Aldo did just as good of a job of stopping people from taking him down as St. Pierre did of taking people down. So sometimes you don't see it. That's not what Coach Whitman's talking about. I'm aware. Coach Whitman is talking about Justin going out, using his wrestling and getting on top of Khabib. I highly suggest that he go and try to do that. Whether he gets there or not, I suggest he try. I suggest he offer the threat, and I like that theme. But philosophically speaking, it does make me wonder, does Justin still have good offense? Because wrestling is like any other tool. If you are not keeping it sharp, it goes dull and then it goes away. If you keep that in the drawer long enough thinking you're going to bring it out just for it's not the way that it works. Now, Coach Whitman would know because he sees Justin in the practice room. He sees him going with great wrestlers like Kamaru Usman. Does he see Justin changing elevation and blasting a double? Does he see him closing the distance, getting an underhook, pushing you into the fence? All of that is wrestling. And all of that is used by Khabib. Khabib will get that underhook, walk you into the fence, go to work from there, start entangling the legs, start to look to get his hands wrapped around a body. I mean, there's things and steps that Khabib does, though. It is very fundamental, and it is very by the numbers. He will not get to third base before he touches first. By example, St. Pierre will come hit a home run all at once. The setup, the explosion, and removing you from your feet, using gravity and putting you on down, he will do all at once in a big explosion. But Khabib's not that way. He's going to get the hit to first base, then he's going to steal second. He's going to come to third before he looks to see if they're waving him for home. I'm just saying, if you can throw off any of that order, you can change the entire thing. Justin Gaethje does not have to worry about a takedown, and neither does anybody else, quite frankly, and that's a bit of a broad stroke, without Khabib pushing you into the fence first. Khabib's weapon of choice from the open is a head to the outside single. If I was explaining to you guys what a poor choice of technique that is, I think it would stun you because you have so much respect for Khabib. I would never even teach an athlete that technique. There is no reason, even in the 101 of, well, you got to start somewhere, to have one leg and have your head on the outside in MMA while on your knees. I'm just sharing for you. Khabib's technique is so sophisticated and so high level if he pushes you into the fence first. And I think that some of the fears that Justin Gaethje's team is having, while you listen to them talk, they are very aware, and they might be the first opponent who's aware that the big threat comes once we get pushed up against the fence. So now here comes another question. Now that Chael's done a good job of identifying that for you, what do I suggest Justin do? Because the thing that Khabib does so well is he walks you down. He will march forward, and pretty soon there's nowhere to go. Your back hits the fence, and boom, he's right where he wants to be. So what do you do with a guy like that? And you'll have some sports guys that try to sound sophisticated, and they say, well, circle and use the jet. Circle, and that's stupid. In theory, yes, that's the answer. In reality, not all athletes can move laterally. Not all athletes can circle. So if we're talking Justin Gaethje, show me one fight where he's ever circled. It seems like the easy fix. It's what people love to say. Well, keep him at the end of your punches. The other guy needs to get inside. You'll watch these guys that break down fights and go, man, how did you even get a job here? If you ever say keep a guy at the end of the punch, or if you ever find yourself saying he needs to get inside, you need to quit your job. There is no point to that. How do you not get wet? Well, don't get in the rain. Okay. Thank you. Does anybody have anything more sophisticated to say? Look, at some point, these guys are both going to come at one another. What Justin Gaethje does a good job of is keeping fights ugly. He's not a beautiful fighter. A beautiful fighter in combat would be like a Roy Jones that uses a ton of movement, tricks his opponent, hits him, gets out of the way. Floyd Mayweather would qualify as beautiful. But these ugly and grittier brawler types like Justin Gaethje are very fun to watch, but you have to remember what makes them gritty. Justin will threaten you with knees up the middle. It is one reason why Tony Ferguson not only failed to take Justin down, but he also did not make very many attempts. He had to respect that knee. Every time they got in close, boom, Gaethje's bringing that knee. They get in a little bit tighter, boom, Gaethje's bringing that elbow. Ugly, dirty, effective. I would really, really disagree with anybody that thinks they're going to change Justin Gaethje, and it's a very common thing for a coach to do. A coach studies you, he studies your opponent. He decides that your opponent is better at what they do, and he tries to change you as a way of getting ready for your opponent. All you do is make it a guy worse. You see college athletic programs do this all the time. They bring in some blue chipper, they give him a full ride, and then they want to teach this athlete their philosophy instead of realizing he's so good at his own philosophies that we paid for his schooling for it. You see it all the time, then that athlete ends up washing out. You tried to take something that was so good at what he did that you were willing to buy it, but then you try to change it with your own ideals. It's arrogant, it's foolish, and it never works. And if Gaethje came out and he all of a sudden is trying to circle, or all of a sudden he's switched his feet, he's going from southpaw to orthodox, and he's switching back and forth because some coach had a bright idea, this whole thing's going to blow up. Gaethje is doing in the octagon to win championships, including the one he has now, stuff that he learned 10 years ago. And Khabib is using stuff to win and defend championships now that he learned 10 and 15 years ago. I bring that to you because I do not submit for you either athlete should change. They are a clash of styles. They are largely going to wash each other out. But the one guy who tries to overthink this and get cutesy with it and gets away from what it is that got him here is going to lose.